From their immaculately groomed appearance to the bubbly and personable side of themselves they show for interviews, every part of a celebrity's life has been precisely curated to make them as picture-perfect as possible. Despite the veneer, however, the legacies of some celebrities have been tarnished after they were caught carrying out horrific crimes, leaving them to be most remembered for the horrors they inflicted on others, rather than for their talents. Join us in today's episode, where we'll be exploring a few such cases as we examine the stories of three celebrities who have killed people. Johnny Lewis. Born on October 29, 1983, Jonathan Kendrick Lewis grew up in Los Angeles. Better known by the name Johnny Lewis, he was the middle of three children, and his parents were avid Scientologists. After graduating from high school, he left home to pursue a career in acting. In his late teens, Lewis began receiving guest roles in various American drama series, including Criminal Minds and Malcolm in the Middle. In 2004, he made his first film appearance as Engelbert Kerry Wilson, a side character in the Hilary Duff film Raise Your Voice. The following year, he appeared in Underclassmen, an action comedy starring Nick Cannon. Between 2005 and 2006, he played Dennis Chili Childress on The OC, and he also starred in the 5th season of Smallville. However, Lewis is perhaps best known for his role as Kip, half-Zach Epps in the first 2 seasons of Sons of Anarchy. In 2009, he decided to leave this role and asked to be written out of the show. The series creator, Kurt Sutter, noted, quote, "Johnny wasn't happy. Creatively, he really wanted out of his contract." Lewis's father added, quote, "He told us he left because the show was getting into gratuitous violence. He didn't want to communicate that as an artist." Lewis then appeared in a few low-budget and short films after his Sons of Anarchy exit, seemingly happy living off the money he'd already earned while he worked on his debut novel, reportedly about a gifted musician in San Francisco. Around this time, he found out that his girlfriend was pregnant, but by 2010, the couple had split up. They attempted to live together for the sake of their daughter, but Lewis eventually moved out. Afterwards, the pair became embroiled in a long and painful custody battle, which he ultimately lost. In late October 2011, Lewis lost control of his motorbike and crashed. Though he was checked by hospital staff for signs of concussion, he showed none and was discharged. Those who knew the 27-year-old, however, became concerned by his conduct following the accident. His behavior became increasingly bizarre and erratic, and his father encouraged him to undergo several MRIs, all of which Lewis refused. To make matters worse, his strange behavior soon escalated, and he became violent. On January 3, 2012, Lewis left his parents' home in Northridge to go for a walk. Still in pajama bottoms and a t-shirt, he made his way through the neighborhood, but soon came across what he thought were cries of distress coming from a nearby unit. He decided to break in, but the home was empty. Moments later, 2 men arrived on the scene and asked the 27-year-old to leave. Instead of complying, Lewis went after the 2 men with a bottle. He struck them both on the head and became engaged in a physical altercation with the 2, even biting one of them on the arm. He was eventually overpowered and restrained until law enforcement arrived on the scene. Lewis was charged with trespassing, burglary, and assaults with a deadly weapon. He claimed he was acting in self-defense and was placed in jail. 3 days later, he was moved to a psychiatric ward after he reportedly banged his head into concrete and attempted to leap from the 2nd floor of the prison. For 72 hours, he remained in psychiatric care. His discharge summary read, "Chief complaint, blunt head trauma and suicidal." After 8 days in jail, Lewis was returned to his parents. He came home with 2 black eyes, his sister recalling, "He looks like a wounded, broken animal." His family noted that he didn't want anyone touching or coming near him, and he became hypersensitive to light, eventually disabling the fuse box in the house so that the lights couldn't ever be turned on. Unfortunately, things never got better for the actor. He attempted to take his own life in the following weeks, leaving his friends and family to take turns looking after him and never letting him go out alone. Around a month later, his family deemed that he was more stable, and they allowed him to live alone in Santa Monica. But less than 2 weeks later, on February 10th, he was arrested for knocking a man out outside a store. After he was released on bail, he walked into the ocean in Santa Monica fully clothed and was hospitalized for hypothermia. A week later, on February 18th, he was arrested once more, this time for attempting to break into a woman's home. He was released on bail again. A few months passed, and by May of 2012, friends commented that they didn't recognize him, describing him as someone who, quote, had a look I've only seen in disturbed veterans of war. His memory was scattered. He vacillated between basic, lucid conversation and incoherence. Lewis was prescribed medication for schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, but refused to take them. His father noted that he never received a clear diagnosis. Was he suffering from mental illness, or did he have an undiagnosed brain injury? A probation officer at the time noted his concern, quote, for the well-being not only of the community, but that of the defendant, adding that Lewis appeared to be suffering from mental health issues and that he believed he would, quote, continue to be a threat to any community he may reside in. Things finally came to a head on September 26, 2012, when 28-year-old Johnny Lewis was found dead in L.A. at the writer's villa where he lived. He had stayed at the bed and breakfast in 2009 and moved back into the villa at some point in 2012. The property was owned and operated by 81-year-old Catherine Harris and was inhabited by up-and-coming Hollywood stars, be they actors, writers, or directors. At the scene, not only did the police discover Lewis, but they also found his landlady, deceased, and her pet cat, who'd been killed and discarded on the bathroom floor. The LAPD had been called to the scene after the neighbors had been violently attacked by Lewis, and they'd heard Catherine screaming. A later autopsy showed that she died by manual strangulation and blunt force trauma to her head, with the coroner's report noting that the murder was particularly violent, having obliterated the left side of her face. Her nose was split down the middle, and her upper jaw was split open. For puncture wounds were found on her left cheek, likely from the mechanical pencil found beside her body. Lewis, meanwhile, had fled back to Catherine's property after attacking his neighbors before falling from the roof or garage, dying upon impact. His autopsy revealed that he had no drugs or alcohol in his system at the time of his death, despite the speculation that he'd suffered drug-induced psychosis at the time of the attack, as he had a history of substance abuse. His death was ruled accidental, as there was no evidence he'd been pushed or that he'd jumped willingly from the roof. The motive behind the attack on Catherine is unclear, but one rumor among her friends was that she told him off for turning off the electricity in her home, which led to Lewis punching her several times before strangling her. While there was a hammer found in his room, it's unclear if he used it. Investigators speculated that Lewis stomped on Catherine's skull before turning his rage to her cat. Friends and family expressed shock at the news of Lewis's death and his actions before dying. In the wake of his demise, Sons of Anarchy creator Kurt Sutter tweeted, I am deeply sorry that an innocent life had to be thrown into his destructive path. Yes, it's a day of mourning, but it's also a day of awareness and gratitude. Sadly, some of us carry the message by dying. Vince Neil. Born February 8, 1961, Vincent Neil Wharton spent much of his childhood moving around Southern California. Though born in Hollywood, LA, he spent times in the likes of Inglewood and Watts before his family settled in the city of Glendora in Los Angeles County. As a young boy, his interests were varied. He loved surfing, baseball, wrestling, and music. In 1981, Neil became the frontman of the now acclaimed heavy metal band Motley Crue, who at the time had recently formed and were still finding their feet. Motley Crue has since gone on to become one of the most established metal bands in the world, having sold over 100 million records and achieved 7 platinum or multi-platinum certifications. Neil was discovered by drummer Tommy Lee Bass. They'd known each other in school, and Bass thought he would be the perfect fit for the band. They recorded their first album in 1981 and their second in 1983. It was this entry, Shout at the Devil, which brought them fame and fortune and helped them cement their legendary status. However, as the band rose to stardom, Neil and his bandmates began to spiral. During the 1980s, they were well known, as were many musicians of the time, to be using drugs, specifically cocaine, LSD, and heroin. Bass player and co-founder of the band, Nikki Sixx, became addicted to the latter at some stage. In much later interviews, Neil admitted that his substance abuse issues had started long before he joined the band, and he subsequently struggled with cocaine and heroin addiction. He and his bandmates eventually wound up in rehab due to their excessive drug use. During the early 1980s, Hanoi Rocks was an up-and-coming Finnish rock band, the first, in fact, to chart in the UK. The Japanese public adored them, and by all accounts, they were set to take the world by storm. Formed in 1979, they launched their fifth album in 1984, the second single of which was beginning to take rise in the charts. Described by music journalist Ian Fortnam as being an eye-scorching flash of amplified technicolor in an otherwise bland and monotonous world, Hanoi Rocks were destined for nothing but greatness. Until it all came crashing down. In December 1984, Hanoi Rocks were on their second U.S. tour, having sold out 2 shows in L.A. in just 20 minutes. Arriving on December 8th, several members of the band, including Nicholas Razzle Dingley, the drummer, and excluding frontman Michael Monroe, who was recovering from a fractured ankle, visited Vincent Neil at his home in Redondo Beach. After spending much of their time together partying, Neil and Razzle hopped into Neil's car to purchase more alcohol at a local store. However, Neil was driving under the influence, and it wasn't long before the trip descended into chaos when he lost control of the vehicle and hit an oncoming car. While the occupants of the other vehicle were seriously injured, even suffering brain damage, it was Razzle who lost the most, dying upon impact. Neil, meanwhile, suffered from some cracked ribs and superficial cuts to his face. Neil was subsequently charged with vehicular manslaughter and driving under the influence, with his blood alcohol level being 0.17, well above California's legal limit at the time, which was 0.10. In December 1985, he was sentenced to 30 days in jail and 5 years probation. He was also ordered to pay $2.6 million in restitution to the victims of the crash and participate in 200 hours of community service. He was paroled after just 2 weeks for good behavior. Though this is Neil's worst offense, he is no stranger to criminal convictions and has had a lengthy history of run-ins with law enforcement in the years since. In 2002, he was arrested for punching a record producer in a nightclub parking lot. The following year, he was arrested for assaulting a sex worker in Nevada. Between 2004 and 2016, he became embroiled in a fight that left a sound man unconscious, was arrested twice for drunk driving, was charged with battery and disorderly conduct after fighting with an ex-girlfriend, was sued for fraud, and was charged again with battery after he assaulted a woman who'd approached while asking for a photograph in Las Vegas. He was reportedly restrained by actor Nicolas Cage. Motley Crue's third album, Theater of Pain, was dedicated to Razzle. Hanoi Rocks, meanwhile, struggled to recover from the loss of their drummer and disbanded in 1985. Lead vocalist Michael Monroe and lead guitarist Andy McCoy eventually reunited, but this new lineup was dissolved in 2009 after 8 years together. Some of the original band members, including McCoy, have spoken of their anger and distaste with the legal ramifications of Neil's actions, stating, quote, "It was a crime. Not only did Razzle die, 2 young people got crippled, and this guy sat 1 night in jail, got away with a misdemeanor." McCoy has also voiced his frustration that although other members of Motley Crue apologized, Neil never did. Oscar Pistorius. Oscar Pistorius was born on November 22, 1986 in Sancton, Johannesburg, South Africa. The middle of 3 children, he was born with fibula hemimelia, the congenital absence of the fibula or calf bone in both legs. At the age of 11, Pistorius had the lower half of his legs amputated, but it didn't slow him down. Throughout his school career, he proved himself to be a star athlete, playing rugby and water polo and attending wrestling classes. He was a keen fitness enthusiast and trained at a gym in Pretoria, with the gym owner remarking that for 6 months, they didn't even realize Pistorius had no legs, as he was such a capable athlete, participating in exercise regimes that included boxing, skipping, and press-ups. In 2003, at the age of 17, he injured his knee during rugby. While undergoing rehabilitation, he was introduced to running and quickly took to the sport. Shortly afterwards, he had his first racing blades fitted by an expert prosthesist in South Africa, but was eventually referred to an American prosthesist and Paralympic sprintist named Brian Frasher, so he could be fitted for special blades made by an Icelandic company as ordinary blades broke too quickly. From 2004 onwards, Pistorius began competing in professional running events, including the 2004 Summer Paralympics, during which he came third overall in the 100-meter event for single below-knee amputees. He also qualified for the 200-meter event final, which he subsequently won with a world record time of 21.97 seconds. In the following 8 years, Pistorius continued to compete in professional running events, taking home numerous gold medals, as well as several silver and a few bronze, as well as competing in sprint events for below-knee amputees. He also participated in non-disabled sprinting events. He is listed as the 10th athlete to compete in both the Paralympic Games and the Olympic Games. And in 2011, at the World Championships in Athletics, he became the first amputee to win a non-disabled world track medal. During this period of Pistorius' life, he was known for his incredible athletic feats and dubbed Blade Runner by the public and the media. Today, he is better known for the infamous shooting of his girlfriend. On February 14, 2013, the police were alerted to a shooting that had taken place on Pistorius' property. At the time, his girlfriend, 29-year-old Riva Steenkamp, was staying with him. Pistorius and Riva had met in 2012. She was considered an A-lister on the South African celebrity circuit and was often part of the Johannesburg party scene. After graduating from university with a Bachelor of Laws degree in 2005, she began working as a paralegal and as a model, becoming the face of Avon Cosmetics, starring in campaigns for the jewelry company Savannah Diamonds, and becoming a cover girl for the FHM magazine. Investigators soon learned that Riva was the victim of the shooting at Pistorius' home. She was found dead, having been fatally shot in the head and arm. Pistorius would later claim he'd mistaken his girlfriend for an intruder and shot 4 times through a locked bathroom door. 3 of these bullets hit Riva. Pistorius subsequently broke down the bathroom door with a cricket bat and reportedly attempted to revive the 29-year-old while calling for help. One of the first to arrive on the scene was a neighbor and doctor who attempted to open up Riva's airways using a jaw lift maneuver. However, he noted that she had no pulse, showed no signs of breathing, and her pupils were fixed and dilated. Attempts to resuscitate her were futile. Pistorius admitted to authorities during a hearing 5 days later that he had shot Riva 4 times, but that he thought she was an intruder. He pleaded not guilty, adding that he had been frightened by the noise and was in a vulnerable state of mind without his prosthetic legs. Still, he was charged with murder and his trial began on March 3, 2014 in Pretoria High Court. On May 20th, the trial was postponed so that Pistorius could undergo psychiatric evaluation. While he was diagnosed with general anxiety disorder, the trial was resumed on June 30th, as it was established that his disorder would not skew his notion of right and wrong, and he could be held criminally liable for his actions. Neighbors testified hearing the blood-curdling scream of a woman on the night of the incident, as well as gunshots and a man yelling for help. Prosecutors claimed that Pistorius had argued with Riva that night, which had caused her to lock herself in the bathroom away from him. During the trial, Pistorius took to the stand to defend himself. He offered an apology to Riva's family, but continued to maintain that the shooting had been an accident. Though he openly wept in court, there were rumors, later denied by Pistorius, that he'd taken acting lessons in the months before his court appearance. Closing arguments in the case were heard on August 7th and 8th. The following month, on September 12th, Pistorius was found guilty of culpable homicide. In South Africa, culpable homicide is defined as the unlawful, negligent killing of a human being and is similar to the U.S. ruling of involuntary manslaughter. Pistorius was also found guilty of one firearm-related charge of reckless endangerment relating to an incident where a firearm was discharged in a restaurant. On October 21st, he was given 5 years maximum for culpable homicide and a concurrent 3-year suspended sentence for the firearm conviction. On October 19th, 2015, however, less than 1 year later, Pistorius was released from prison. He was subsequently placed under house arrest and correctional supervision for the next 4 years. Riva's family, meanwhile, spoke of forgiveness and empathy, stating, quote, I didn't want him to be thrown in jail and suffering because I don't wish suffering on anyone. And that's not going to bring Riva back. Less than 2 months later, on December 3rd, a South African appeals court overturned his previous conviction and ruled he was guilty of first-degree murder. The court stated their belief that a dismissal of circumstantial evidence and a misinterpretation of the laws had caused the prosecution to only charge Pistorius with the lesser crime of culpable homicide the year before. Judge Eric Leach noted, quote, "I have no doubt that in firing the fatal shots, the accused must have foreseen, and therefore did foresee that whoever was behind the toilet door might die, but reconciled himself to that event occurring and gambled with that person's life. The identity of his victim is irrelevant to his guilt." As a result of this new ruling, in the summer of 2016, Pistorius was sentenced to 6 years in prison for Riva's murder. Though for many it was an improvement over his 4 years of house arrest, the South African National Prosecuting Authority argued that it was far too lenient a sentence and disproportionate to the crime. A new sentence was therefore handed down the following year. Pistorius, now 31, was given 13 years and 5 months behind bars. A Supreme Court justice named Willie Sorty noted that the former sports star had failed to explain why he fired the fatal shots and pointed out his lack of remorse during court hearings. He added that the previous sentence of 6 years was shockingly lenient to a point where it has the effect of trivializing this serious offense. In the years since Pistorius entered the prison system, June Steenkamp has set up a foundation in her daughter's name, aiming to highlight violence against women and children. 10 years later, she still grieves for Riva, stating, "We just love her so much and miss her. Part of her life is gone, but we will see her one day, and that is what we look forward to." And there you have the facts. Please leave a comment down below with your own thoughts and reactions. And remember to like this video and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you for watching. Stay alert, stay safe,